So we're here with Jason Birnbaum from Bow Properties, and Jason, can you tell me a little bit about your family's company?
Absolutely. So Bow Properties is a family company. We originally from Winnipeg, Manitoba. We moved here in the 70s. My grandfather started though back in Winnipeg in the 60s, and my father, when we moved to Toronto, started acquiring multi-res buildings primarily. And up until probably the late 90s, that was our primary focus. We branched out from there into other kinds of commercial and investment properties and expanded across Canada into Ottawa, Calgary, now we're in BC, and also down into Bahamas and parts of New York City. But multi-res is our primary business and our primary focus.
Jason, what's the most challenging part in the process of listing and selling a property as far as a seller goes?
Well, as you know, private property owners, for us it's probably the notion of parting with one of these favored sons or favored daughters in our portfolio that we've come to love over the years. We haven't done a lot of selling, but when we turn our mind to it and say, okay, this is an asset we're willing to part with, generally speaking, I think it's the key is to be transparent. If you really want to get your price, you have to provide clear information that's consistent and that a buyer can readily digest and absorb. So, there's no point in holding back on something that a smart buyer is going to find. So you just want everything to be clean and upfront, and you'll get a transaction done quickly. We did a deal in Calgary, the last multi-res we sold a couple of years ago, and what we found in that situation was it was a hot market. We wanted to capture what we considered to be a hot market, and we were doing some conversion of some other buildings, so we wanted to sell one of the properties wholesale. And to me, the most important thing was the ability of that buyer to close. And it wasn't necessarily the highest price that we probably could have gotten for the property, but we knew he could close. He came up with a nice deposit, nice enough deposit that we were perfectly happy if he wasn't able to close. So that deal went pretty smoothly, and on from there to the next one.
Mm-hmm. Now let me ask you, when preparing one of your assets for sale, what are the most important areas to look for or to prepare after for inspection?
Well, you want to make sure everything's running smoothly. You want to make sure that it shows nicely, and all the landscaping is and the curb appeal is top notch. And you want to inform your staff when people are coming to see it on that day that they can get access to suites and common areas that they need to see. Mm-hmm. And I guess generally speaking, it's something that presentation matters, and being sure. Thorough and conscientious matters. So, mm-hmm. You have to take it seriously. In any transaction, as a seller, I find leverage is a big factor. We sold a commercial property recently, and it was something where I consider to be kind of a Godfather offer scenario. An offer we couldn't refuse. And in that situation, we were very comfortable with the fallback of owning the property and maintaining it. And this, to be honest, the buyer came up with a few conditions that we weren't so thrilled with, and we said, look, if this doesn't work for you, that's okay, because we're comfortable with the asset. So we put it back to them to take on that risk, and sure enough, they did, and the transaction went through smoothly. Everybody was happy. So it's really a leverage situation. How badly do you want to buy? How badly do you want to sell?
Exactly. Yeah. So,
Tony, what should an owner do in order to prepare their property for sale?
Well, there are a few things an owner can do. It all depends on the owner's appetite and how committed they are to a sale. Selling, as far as just putting up a building for sale and listing it, it's become difficult because there are some unknowns in certain buildings. Environmental laws, in particular, have gotten much more stringent in the last year and a half. So, what we try to do in order to try and make the process much smoother is to get the seller to commit to at least getting a phase 1 environmental report mm-hmm. completed by a reputable engineering firm with a reliance letter. That really helps things move more smoothly down the road, and we can try and in exchange we can try to let the seller know that, look, if you're willing to step forward and pay a little bit of money for that report, we can try and get the due diligence period condensed, because that's usually one of the biggest delays, aside from the financing, of course, to get the deal to firm up. Another good idea would be for an owner to commission a building structural and mechanical condition report. Those do go a long way. If it's done by a reputable firm as well, buyers tend to put a lot of credence in that report, and and will generally accept it as fact and move forward with the deal. So those two are very important. Also critical in this market, selling a property that's got some, let's say, some unusual financing on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good idea to have all that discharged before going to market. It's going to be very difficult, even in this market, to have a buyer try and assume some what I'd call some unconventional financing, or financing with some very high rates, or maybe some unusual security requirements. That's become a bit of a deal killer as well. So again, a free and clear building, a phase 1 environmental, building condition report, and also generally try and keep your building up to around 2% vacancy. If you're running a little bit high on the vacancy side, you might want to get that filled up, because that'll avoid some questions.
2%, don't say that in front of my father. I'll have a heart attack. We like to run a 0% vacancy.
Well, that's everyone's dream, but we never get there, do we?
Well, it's definitely prudent to stay on top of those things. So what are the benefits today associated with listing a property for sale as opposed to doing an off-market deal? How would you characterize the benefits?
Well, I mean, in my experience, listing a property for sale has become critical in the current market that we're in. We have so many new buyers, new potential buyers that have come into the market that we never even had 5 years ago. We have a lot of international capital that's flowing into the country that are looking for really good assets to park money. Mm-hmm. In our business as national brokers, we've generally dealt with all the larger REITs and the larger private families and private buyers, but there is that part of the market that we don't see, the underlying 10-20% of buyers that are really just looking to place money, and those tend to be some of the strongest buyers. So listing a property does two things. One, it puts the seller in control of the process as opposed to the buyer. When you're doing an off-market deal, really the control goes over into the buyer's seat. Although you still have the option not to sell. As far as negotiating or trying to get the highest price, you just don't have the same amount of leverage that you will if you're in a listing and competing with other buyers. Competition drives prices much higher. I've seen it in every single situation that I've done. Mm-hmm. Off-market deals, I've seen trade at incredible discounts. In some cases, millions of dollars being left on the table. Wow. It was shocking. But if you're a smaller owner who's been out of the market for a number of years, or even haven't purchased a building ever, or maybe have inherited a building, how do you know what the current market conditions are like? Sure. It's important to engage a strong, reputable broker and try and get an overview of exactly where things are at as far as pricing goes, because your building might be worth X to one person and it can be worth Y to another, and that difference between X and Y could be upwards of $1 million, $2 million, or even 10-20% in some cases. It
definitely pays to have a proper listing package prepared, and even an off-market deal. Someone recently tried to bring me in prime off-market multi-res property that I was interested in, and they didn't even know the number of suites in the building.
Well, there you go. How much credence?
Their due diligence was going and counting the suites from the street. So sure. I didn't spend a lot of time on that transaction.
Absolutely.
But I have a feeling it'll come to market with a reputable firm like Cushman ultimately, if the seller's serious. And she probably will get real top dollar for it.
Yeah. Question for you: when receiving multiple offers as a seller, if you're receiving multiple offers on a building, what stands out the most to you? What are the certain things you look for in those offers?
I think the most important thing is the ability to close. If they're all within a certain range, and as a reasonable seller, I think you know what your property's worth. So if they're in a certain range, you want to know, can that buyer close? Is his deposit non-refundable? Is it firm? And from there, as I say, an organization that's private, and we don't often sell properties because we have a more longer-term horizon, generally speaking. I just want to know at the end of the day, am I going to get the money? And if there's a nice deposit there, then I'm pretty comfortable, because we're generally we're selling only essentially to take advantage of a hot market, as opposed to necessarily pay off high cost debt or high leverage. So generally, if there's enough of a firm deposit there, I'm pretty comfortable. So and who is that buyer? Are they reputable? Are they going to give you any headaches at the closing table or anything like that? But we've had a lot of success and some good luck in the process. And as I've stated before, I think it really comes down to trust. It really comes down to meeting of the minds, and we can put anything in writing, but if you know who your buyer is and you're comfortable with them, you'll get a deal done.
Now, transitioning to sort of the business side of the real estate transaction, what stage of the sales process do you feel it's best to inform the employees, of an impending sale?
Sure. Well, generally on a multi-res property, the first thing I would do once the seller is committed to the transaction is, ask them if they would like the current staff to stay on board. And we typically in buildings we bought have maintained staff, and people generally do, and then hopefully they work within their system. But that's definitely the easiest approach. So, you want to assure anyone who's working there that their job is secure, but you want to inform them of the process. But generally you need their cooperation, and they're going to typically in a multi-res building know that there's going to be some transition. But it's very hard to find good quality staff in a multi-res market today, especially with all the condos poaching all of our good staff. So, it's almost a situation where you want to be very delicate with them and make sure they're comfortable.
Yeah. Well, it's a very important part of the business. Human resources, we generally run smaller shops, but it is very important to find good talent, and good talent is very scarce these days.
Absolutely. We've had some staff that have been with us for close to 20 years now, and it's amazing because, again, it goes back to trust and comfort level, and at the end of the day, they're the front line in your building, because as much as you can read the financial statements and know what your vacancy reports are month to month, they're the ones that are greeting your tenants and your new residents and keeping the lights on. So, we appreciate that. So, Tony, moving on to the state of the market, our topic. Do current conditions suggest this is the right time to sell, or should sellers wait a little longer and hope for another boost?
Well, from a broker's perspective, it's always a good time to sell. But all kidding aside, we've had a really good run in the last 15 years. We've been in a market of declining rates, and all evidence suggests that trend's probably going to reverse. Now, I don't think we're going to be seeing a huge uptick in rates that we've seen, nowhere near what we saw in obviously the early 80s or the 90s. But we will see, I would guess maybe a 200 to 300 basis point move upwards in probably the next 10 to 15 years. And depending on how fast rates go, theoretically, an asset today could be worth much more than an asset 15 months from now if rates went up, let's say, 0.5% or even 1%. So it really depends on where the buyer is in terms of where they want to be. It's important that if they're looking to get out of the market now, they should sell today as opposed to waiting 12 to 15 months from now, because I do believe that the asset would probably be priced somewhat less. And one question I had for you, what advice would you provide to smaller size owners looking to sell their buildings?
Well, if they're looking to sell today, I think the key is as I mentioned before, transparency. Get everything out there on the table up front. Get a reputable broker like yourself involved, and get that property on the market, because as you said, it's a good time. There's plenty of capital out there. There's plenty of buyers out there that they'll pay top dollar. So just don't waste any time, and leave everything on the table. You don't want any surprises. You don't want a buyer to find any surprises when they're going through their due diligence. You want everything clear and upfront.
Sure. Absolutely.
Work with a professional.
Absolutely. Jason, thank you very much for taking some time out to come see us today, and good luck.
The RHB Insider Network is an RHB Inc. production, publishers of RHB Magazine, and the producers of RHB Newsreel.